Hey everybody, welcome to Local Business Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Case, and I'm on a mission to help you. Every week, we're going to be talking to local business owners and experts to get their best tips, tricks, and hacks to grow your business. This show is designed to teach you, inspire you, and motivate you to take massive action and start to build your future-proof business. Whether you're just starting off or you're taking your existing business to the next level, this episode is for you. So let's get started. Hey, local business hackers. I'm your host, Director of Global Business Development at Referrizer, Carl Case, joined today by the Executive Director of Gracie Barra Jiu-Jitsu Global, Flavio Almeida. Flavio, welcome to Local Business Hacks, brother.
Thank you, Carl. It's an honor and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited for our conversation.
Awesome. So talk to me a little bit about your journey to get to this point at Gracie Barra.
Man, I started as a student, just like most of the Gracie Barra corporate employees. I started my Jiu-Jitsu journey, which is the art that we teach, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. At age 13, I was being bullied. It's a traditional martial arts journey, right? Like the typical, Daniel-san, Karate Kid. I was being bullied, and then I got into martial arts, and I had a great connection with my instructor, who's the founder of Gracie Barra, Carlos Gracie Jr., and he mentored me, him and a few other senior instructors, he mentored me throughout the rankings. So at first for me, it was just a hobby that became very serious since I moved very quickly into the competitive side of jiu-jitsu. So I started competing at the state, national, and world championship level. And I did well, so I started to pick up from there until I became a black belt. And then I started to teach on the side, but at that point in time, it was the early 2000s. It was not really like a career because the sport was so small. And Gracie Barra wasn't a franchise. We're just like a bunch of scattered jiu-jitsu schools in a few different places around Brazil, and a few in the United States and a few in Europe. So I actually put my jiu-jitsu career on hold to finish my college degree. And I got an opportunity to work a little bit at corporate Brazil for a few years. And then when Master Carlos, our founder, decided that he wanted to bring Gracie Barra to a more professional level, he invited me to help him build the organization. So I came back to Jiu-Jitsu more as an executive in 2007. And since then, I've just been helping build different areas of the organization. And more recently, right after the pandemic, so 2021, he invited me to take this global leadership role as the executive director of Gracie Barra Jiu-Jitsu Global. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on being the true story of starting from the bottom and now we're here. That's
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey, that's for sure.
So talk to me, for those people that haven't heard of Gracie Barra Jiu-Jitsu, what is it? How many locations you got? How can people get involved?
All right, so for you to understand what Gracie Barra is, you need to understand what Jiu-Jitsu is. First, how do you spell it? It's Jiu-Jitsu. A lot of English speakers, they would use the Z, the last letter of the alphabet, and not the J. So it's Jiu-Jitsu. And it's a specific strain of Jiu-Jitsu called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a long story, but Jiu-Jitsu gets exported from Japan in the beginning of the 20th century. It arrives in many different places around the world, including the United States, Europe, and Brazil. But it flourishes in Brazil on the hands of the Gracie family. Okay? So, fast forward, I would say 60 years from when the sport actually arrived in Brazil, and it was slightly modified by the Gracie family. Then Gracie Barra is founded in 1986. In the city of Barra da Tijuca, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So what's the name Gracie Barra? You want to think about it like it's the Gracie school because that's the family that created the sport in Brazil. In Barra da Tijuca, right? So, for example, I live in Phoenix, Arizona. It will be equivalent to Gracie Phoenix. So it's Gracie Barra. It's an amazing neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where the Olympics happened a few years back, right? Okay, so then the brand goes from being like a small local jiu-jitsu school, just one school, to now a global franchise we're approaching 1,100 locations in the 5 continents. So it's truly a remarkable business story, especially when you take into consideration that it really only started to operate as a business versus just being like a competition team for jiu-jitsu in 2005, right? So from 2005 to 2020, right before the pandemic, we grew from about 50 locations to 900 locations worldwide. So it's quite a remarkable story for anybody that wants to get involved or learn more. I mean, if you love martial arts, if you love, the values that it teaches, I'm pretty sure there is. And if you live on a mid to large city across the world, I'm pretty sure there is a Gracie Barra school. I would highly recommend going there because jiu-jitsu is one of the fastest growing sports around the world. And it's happening for a reason. It's really an incredible sport that is really for everyone, not just for meatheads like me.
And if there's not a Gracie Barra in your city, this is a perfect opportunity to get involved with Flavio and his team and head to graciebarra.com and go down the franchising path.
Absolutely. Yeah. The whole point of us operating as a franchise is to fulfill our mission of bringing jiu-jitsu for everyone, right? We're big believers on the in-person, face-to-face training experience. And we've been observing quite attentively the shift that is happening, the shift in the fitness industry towards digital training experiences. And although we have our digital training platform, we're a big believer on the old school, traditional brick and mortar local business. And the franchise model was really a tool for us to be able to bring the benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to as many people as we can around the world. So if you're interested in getting involved on the business side, get in touch with our franchise team and we'll be happy to help you navigate the franchising process.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, 1,100 locations strong. Clearly know what you're doing at this point. It's not studio number 2. Let's take a shift into why we're here today. So obviously being in jiu-jitsu and stepping to corporate America for a brief period and now being back as top dog at Gracie Barra, we know that you have some cool tools in your toolkit, but we're really interested in the stories that molded those tools. So I welcome you to share with us what are some experiences that you would hate for someone else to live through again, or with the tools that added to your toolbox.
Look, beyond being the executive director of our global franchise, I also own and operate 11 franchisees, right? So I'm a local business owner as well. I built my first school in the city of San Clemente, California. Now I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, where we run 9 locations. And some of the things that I have to share are very unique to my product in my industry, because it's one thing like if you're selling bread, right? Or if you're selling a service or a product that everybody knows what it is, right? Everybody knows what a bakery is. Everybody knows what a coffee shop is. And everybody knows what a nail salon is, right? These are commodity products and services. For us, it's like we had to come out to communities around the world and say, hey, come learn jiu-jitsu with us. They'll be like, what is it? Right? So we had to, and that's where I think I'll be able to provide some insight to even those people that are running local businesses that are, offering more standard products and services. We had to focus and be obsessive about building communities and building relationships with our customers and make sure that we are able to present our service in a very inclusive way that it made it attractive for everyone, regardless of their age, their gender, and their level of familiarity with the sport, right? Because again, coming from Brazil, all the cultural barriers, all the odds were against us, right? We're battling a martial arts culture that is primarily focused on the striking arts like karate, like taekwondo, right? So all the odds were against us, with the exception of one. The UFC was showing to the world how important grappling is for anybody who wants to be a serious fighter, a serious martial artist who wants to learn how to protect themselves. So how we hacked our way into becoming a global brand and one of the fastest growing martial arts brands in the world was to, instead of just focusing on offering the best product that we could, and we do that, we had a very strong focus on building communities on creating relationships that were even bigger than the transaction of you pay tuition, I teach jiu-jitsu, right? So when we sell a membership, when we train our program directors that do the sales, like, look, you're not selling. This is not a transaction. This is a lifelong relationship that you're trying to establish. So the transaction is just one of the components of this relationship that we're trying to build. And if you do that over and over, then what you have is not a contract or a membership agreement. What you have is a human being that you're trying to find a way to make jiu-jitsu work for them, not just because you want to create a great fighter, but because you want to hopefully develop a better human through those training experiences they have with us.
Incredible. So lesson learned is to invest in people.
Absolutely. And to be able to sell a lifestyle, not a product, right? It's to sell a lifestyle and to create a community that is so strong that people can create an identity around it, right? And I don't think this is only restricted to jiu-jitsu, you know? As a local business, it's important that people develop an identity around attending your coffee shop, right? You have the little tribe that comes, you have like your 7 a.m. tribe that comes in for that specific coffee shop and you know their name. Or if you're a bakery, that there's something so unique and special about your the bread that you bake that people have an identity around it, and they will tell their friends, hey, my bread comes from this specific place because of reason X, Y, and Z. Because otherwise you're just another business out there. And then it's really, really hard for you to compete with the big brands or the Panera Breads or anything really that is going to come in and is going to have the marketing budget and everything behind it. So as a local business owner, either you're part of a big franchise or not, it's really important for you to be able to focus on relationships and community building. And the way to do that is not just to sell a great product, but it's to have your staff oriented towards that. Because by the way, then their work has much more meaning. It's no longer about the transaction. It's about building meaningful relationships and making an impact on them. But also making sure that you're hosting events that allow those relationships to form beyond the purchase of the coffee, beyond the jiu-jitsu class, beyond the coffee that you get in the morning. You know?
The Panera Bread example is great. I go to the local bakery because the girl behind the counter knows me by my name. She knows what I want, and she'll sometimes suggest when there's new things. So it's that personal one-on-one touch. I remember the director of sales for Orange Theory was on our show talking about that his most successful franchisees know every employee's name, their spouse's name, their kids' names, and their pets' names. If he has any franchisee that's in the top of his system, he knows all of the people. We're building spaces to explore this community, and it's beautiful. And you see next to no churn when you're doing that. No churn on the employee side, no churn on the membership side. It's incredible.
Yeah, and every time you separate for the local business owners out there, but also for the franchise operators, every time there is a separation between the frontline team members, the people that are coming to consume that experience, every time there is a separation between those people on the front line and ownership, typically you have a disconnect of purpose and meaning. You got to be very careful because the frontline people need to be very connected with the purpose of the brand, the values of the brand. Because when that disconnect happens, that's when you feel that it's impersonal. That's when you feel like you're just another client. It's just a transaction. And that creates a very shallow experience. And more, especially on this post-pandemic world, the people seem to be even more isolated. There's a lot of like people that are working from their home office. So they don't get to interact with a real human, not mediated by a screen for their whole day, sometimes the whole week, some people the whole month. So when they go to a local business to consume an experience, man, what do they want? They don't want just the product. They don't want just the service. They don't want just the class. They yearn in connection, right? So if we're able to build a business that is doing that authentically, right? You're not doing that just because you want to sell another coffee. You're doing that because as a frontline worker, at the end of the day, spending 8 hours on a coffee shop serving coffee could be meaningless, or it could have a lot of meaning if you feel like through every cup of coffee, you have an opportunity to connect and have a positive impact in the lives of the people that you interact, right? I think it's really about bringing that human element into every single jiu-jitsu class, every single coffee, every single bread, that's really what creates the magic of local businesses, regardless if they are flying the Panera bread flag or the local bakery. It's really about being able to instill those values and the purpose in the frontline workers,
100%. Flavio, I'd love to hear from you outside of obviously being very careful on who you award a franchise to. What are some ways that your system really promotes that culture from the internal perspective?
Yeah, so because our product is our experience depends on people, right? And our people need to operate within a certain framework to be able to create an experience that is unique, it's authentic, but is within the guidelines of our brand, right? And we have every year, we require every single Gracie Barra instructor to undergo an instructor certification program, right? And it's thousands of instructors. So we just actually yesterday I got the news that this year we had more than 3,000 instructors going through the certification program, right? And that's, I think, first and foremost is about quality control, although I don't like that terminology, but that's a very easy way for people who are not familiar with our brand to understand. But it's more than quality control because this is more about inspiration than compliance. We want people to operate within those guidelines because they know those guidelines make the experience better and make them better and makes their business stronger and creates a better experience for their members. And not so much because somebody tells them they need to follow a rule. So that's the primary way through which we maintain consistency, and we're able to make sure that whoever is teaching the class in the front line is aligned with the core values of the brand. But there's a lot of other tools that we use for that. Every year we do a world summit that brings everybody together and they have an opportunity to connect with each other, connect with our founder, and we have training sessions there. So there's several different touch points that we put in place to make sure there's plenty of opportunities for people to understand what's expected of them and to learn these tools to create the best experience they possibly can.
It's awesome. I think maybe a new name for quality control could be brand standards control, just to make sure that everybody's staying to have the same experience.
Yeah.
Awesome. Flavio, you're for those of you that are listening, he's a pretty jacked guy in awesome shape. I'd love to hear, what's your morning routine look like?
I'm usually up between 5 and 6 in the morning. I start by doing something that's going to energize my body. Not like a crazy workout, but it's usually like just 20 minutes, 30 minutes at most, not to get me tired, but to get my day going. Then I spend some time inspiring myself. I'm either going to read something, I'm going to listen to a podcast. And then by the time my daughters wake up, I like to spend time with them, getting them ready to go to school. And I usually drive them to school. It's a moment that we get to connect with one another and prepare for the day. That's like, I think to win. So here's something I learned on 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? Dr. Covey. If you want to win your life out there, you got to win your life in here, right? So I got to win the battles with myself. I got to win the battles to build the right relationship with my immediate family. And then I can go to the world and try to win the world. There's no point on trying to win anything in business unless you're winning those private battles, right? So I make sure that I do my best to do those every single day. And then typically I go off to work fully energized. My heart is full of joy of the minutes that I got to spend with my daughter and off to work. Now, I'll add to this, I've learned to not eat in the morning. I know fasting is a big thing. It's worked really well for me for many years. So typically I skip breakfast. I have my cup of coffee. I keep drinking a lot of water. And then I'm only going to eat something by the time it's noon or 1 o'clock. And that is something that really jacks up my productivity because I can stay laser focused. I think all the blood stays up here in my head versus trying to digest the food from the breakfast in my belly.
That's amazing. I'll never forget my first time at Tony Robbins 5 years ago. He says, don't eat for the next 4 days. And I was like, what do you mean don't eat for the next 4 days? He's like, literally don't eat. A couple nuts here and there or some healthy fat, but don't eat. And I didn't believe him. I'm like, I just spent thousands of dollars to sit here for 4 days. I'm going to eat some food. So first day, 2 o'clock rolls around. I'm starving. I'm like, all right, I'm going to eat a turkey burger or a veggie burger. I'll be healthy. I'll be good. 15 minutes later, I'm like this in the chair, falling asleep. And I never realized what effect food had on me until that day. So
it's crazy, man.
It's crazy. Crazy.
We eat much more than we need. I have no doubt about that, from everything, all kinds of experimentations I've done with my body, but also from everything that I've read. There's no need for us to eat as much. It's emotional eating, absolutely emotional eating.
Let alone what we're eating in the US of all countries. It's crazy.
It's pretty bad.
Okay, well, we're not solving the food issue here now, but Monsanto, we're on to you and coming after you. Flavio, talk to me a little bit about being in the executive role and also playing both sides. You see two very unique aspects that most C-level executives don't get their hands on, which is dealing at the studio level. So I'd love to hear from you. How does that help and also hurt being on both sides of the system?
Well, it hurts my schedule, right? Because I have two jobs. Definitely hurts my schedule, right? And I'm luckily I'm married to a wonderful woman who understands my obsession with this, and she respects it and she supports me. But I have long hours, right? So that's the thing that hurts. Now, it keeps me laser focused on the needs of our franchisees, right? And not only in terms of what we need to do to support them, because you can think about as a franchisor, it's like about creating supporting tools and infrastructure to allow them to do their job. But I'm also on the front line training my staff. I'm also on the front line teaching class. I'm also on the front line taking care of my school's social media, right? To an extent, right? I'm not doing this as much as a franchisee, but to an extent, I'm involved. So I see it, and I can innovate at the very front line, or at least I can be the voice for innovation. So, for example, yesterday I was at one of my schools here in Arizona, and I looked at, we have some very nice frames that decorate, but also give out some information to our students, like the training etiquette. And I noticed that there is a slight discrepancy between the look and feel of that specific frame and the other frames. So I was able to have a quick conversation with our design team. I was like, guys, we got to fix that for the next round of updates for the next year. I would never see that if I was just sitting here in this office. And it's just a small thing, right? But there's some very big, hairy stuff that I see happening on the front lines. I'm like, okay, we got to update our insurance policies. We got to retrain everybody on things related to bullying and to safety and all of that stuff. So it's really helpful. And I don't see me stopping being a franchisee for that very reason until I retire from my role as being part of the executive team.
That's awesome. I for all of my C-level friends that are listening to this podcast, take advice, because this is really, it's golden. I think it's incredible that you're really playing both roles, because it'll teach so much. It's one thing writing something.
And look, our biggest inspiration, well, to an extent, he's a controversial guy, but he's funny and he's inspiring. Elon Musk. I mean, the guy is doing SpaceX, Tesla. What's the other one? The AI thing. I mean, if he can do those three things, I'm pretty sure he can be the executive team of the franchisor and still own a franchisee and operate it. So
delegation is key. Hire the right people and keep them in their role.
Yeah.
Or let them explore and grow within your organization. That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
Absolutely, yeah.
Flavio, I got a couple more questions left. One of them, which which I've learned, I can't even tell you how much from asking this over the last year and a half. What are some of your favorite books or audibles that you are currently listening to, or that you recommend that anybody should get their hands on? The Effects of Highly Effective People is amazing. What else?
Yeah. Well, I would spend some time there because it's my number one the book that I recommend to everybody that works with me. Dr. Covey, I think he did a wonderful job creating a framework for life that everybody, I mean, if you haven't read anything, you read The 7 Habits. If you read a lot, read The 7 Habits, because it's a book that gives you so many insights from the philosophical standpoint, but in a very practical way that you implement in your life. Unless you really have at least like a blue belt, purple belt at each one of those habits, like it's not even worth it to move on to anything more deep in terms of personal development and philosophy. So that's definitely my number one book. I've On a much deeper level, I've been recommending to my people to read the stuff that Dr. Jordan Peterson's been writing. The 12 Rules for Life is a truly remarkable thing. I don't even call it self-development. I have to call it self-discovery and how we interact with the culture that we live in. It was eye-opening for me. And I went through some very challenging times in my life a few years back through some personal stuff that happened to me. And Dr. Peterson was my therapist for quite a while. I was just reading his stuff and watching his lectures. And that's definitely something that I highly recommend people to spend time on. Regardless of your political views, you might like the guy or dislike the guy. When you read his stuff, everything is pretty, I would say, neutral. If it's not about being liberal or conservative, it's really about understanding ourselves better and how we operate in a very fast changing cultural world that surrounds us,
It's awesome. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was one of the best books. Luckily, I got my hands on it at a young age, but definitely give that a read and add the 4 agreements to it. And now you got a perfect education in my book.
Absolutely. And, what's interesting about Dr. Covey, he passed away, right, a few years ago, but he wrote the 8th habit, which if you understand what he's trying to do there is just to give people meaning and purpose, because you can be great at the 7 habits and still be miserable, which is quite interesting, right? But you can only find real meaning and purpose if you focus then on the 8th habit, which is to find your voice and help other people find theirs, which is really comes down to meaning and purpose. And I think most of us realize those things at our late 30s, early 40s. Hopefully, by the time you're 50s, you found meaning. But I don't think anybody who's at a younger age and starting their career, I don't think they need to wait that long. It's much better if you start from the get-go, make sure that you align yourself with something that gets you excited about your Monday. That's a great reality check, by the way. If you're miserable on Mondays or Sunday nights, something's really wrong with your life. Do something about it sooner rather than later.
Amazing advice. And just to add to it, if you do find that rhythm, it's okay if it changes. If that purpose changes, go with it. It's all right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm right there with you. Flavio, in wrapping up, I'm going to ask my favorite question. If you were going to have dinner with a historical figure from the past, who would it be and what on earth are you talking about?
Sure. Sensei Jigoro Kano, he's the founder of Judo. Judo is, at first, Jigoro Kano, he was a Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, okay, back in Japan. He reformed the entire system. The system was decaying because Japan was going through a modernization. That incredible cultural heritage that I am a part of, right? That every Jean-Claude Van Damme, Bruce Lee movie, the UFC, all of that was going to die with the modernization of Japan. Fighting with your hands or with a sword was no longer relevant because people could shoot each other, right? Yeah. So whatever that was going to die, Jigoro Kano, who was a jiu-jitsu practitioner, but also a business guy, a government guy, he was actually an economist too. And I'm an economist, so I can identify with that. He came up with this brilliant idea, said, you know what? How about if we started teaching this incredible system of fights, this incredible martial arts called Jiu-Jitsu to civilians? Because if we did that, the Japanese population would be stronger. They not only will be able to fight physically, but they will learn these values that will make them stronger and better citizens, more connected with the core mission of the entire country. So when he did that, he created Judo, right? He formed Jiu-Jitsu, he created Judo, he created Kodokan, and he exported Jiu-Jitsu to the world, right? And he wrote some amazing books. One of them is Mind Over Matter. But I would love to sit down with him in Japan, grab some sushi, which I'd love, and I would love to ask him the question of how exactly did you have that brilliant idea? Because it's one thing to look at things in hindsight, right? He was in the middle of like a very turbulent times in Japan. It's like, you know what? Let's teach martial arts, not just to the military. Let's teach martial arts to regular people. Because if you do so and you do it well, we're going to make a better country. We're going to make a better world. And I'm his legacy. Very grateful that he had that insight. And I would love to have a conversation with him about that.
Incredible. Incredible. Flavio, I'm so proud to know you and to give you a place to speak all this beauty and really, really want to continue to support you and follow you in this journey. And hopefully we have you back on here and we have 5,000 open locations affecting even more people throughout the globe. So congrats to you. Congrats to Gracie Barra and this journey that wasn't easy to get here, but it's finally paying off in masses.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate the opportunity. To all the listeners out there, thanks for listening in. If you have any interest, if this conversation has sparked any interest for you to look for a good jiu-jitsu school wherever you are, or a Gracie Barra school, go there. It's a truly remarkable sport. And before even thinking about getting involved in the business side of the sport, go out there. If it's not to train yourself, observe, because there's magical things happening inside jiu-jitsu schools around the world. And if you see it, I think you'll be able to build some very important connections that maybe get you even more excited so you can train jiu-jitsu or help move the sport forward somehow.
Flavio Almeida, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. That's it for this week's episode. I hope you found it helpful. Be sure to head over to our site, local-business-hacks.com, to check out the show notes and send me questions or ideas for future episodes. If you want to grow your business, just like the people you've heard from here, follow Local Business Hacks Podcast and tune in for new tips, tricks, and tactics. Until next time, thanks for listening and keep hacking.